in 48 hours, the African Cup of Nations is going to be over with. So let's take the time to really enjoy these final two matches. The first being the third place playoff between Nigeria and DR Congo. And then, of course, we have the final on Sunday evening between Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire. This video today is just going to cover the first match, Saturday night's fixture between South Africa and DR Congo. And I'm going to try to release a really detailed, longer video tomorrow about the final between Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire. So, as always, I'm your host of the African Five Side podcast. My name is Maher Mizahi. I'm an Algerian journalist, and this podcast, as always, is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. I just published a piece yesterday on the website about solidarity with the Palestinian cause at the African Cup of Nations and how that was sort of inhibited by what seems to be the Ivorian authorities, although we never really got an answer. So you guys can check that out. I'll put a link in the description. Other than that, let's get right into the football. So, third place finals are always special to me a little bit because my grandfather, Mohammed Mizahi, I'm Maher Mizahi, Mohammed, he, uh, he refed the third place final or the consolation final, the third place match in the 1965 African Cup of Nations. So, what is that, 70 years ago now, a little less than 70 years ago, between Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire. And so it just always, for some reason, has a special place in my heart. I even have a photo of him with the two captains on the day. And I always make it a point to watch the match because it links my family to this tournament. So I'm really excited for this one. But really, the key for third place matches or consolation finals is, in my opinion, the motivation of the two teams. Um, some teams approach it where they absolutely want to win the bronze medal, to take it home, to, put that notch in history to say, we made it to, we have a third place finish. Maybe it means a lot to their country. Whereas other teams, sometimes a coach will want to rotate his squad to thank the players that haven't played at the tournament so far, make sure everybody's involved, to reward them with some gameplay. Maybe their team has, big name players whose clubs are putting pressure on the national teams to say, hey, don't play my guy in this third place meaningless match. So it's not so much about how would these teams compete at full capacity rather than what is the approach of the two separate teams going into this match. And that's what I try to look at. So um, sorry, before we talk about the two teams, if you look at the 2021 third place final, it was Cameroon and Burkina Faso. And Cameroon rotated everybody because they wanted to thank, some of their players that didn't play. And they go down 3-0 to Burkina Faso at halftime. And then they bring on Vincent Aboubakar, they bring on Carl Toko Ekambi, and they're real starters. And they come back and they draw 3-3, they get to penalties, and they win the third place match. Even in 2017, when we had Ghana play against Burkina Faso, Ghana threw on Bernard Tekpeti. They sat Andre Ayew, Asamoah Gyan, all their big players on the bench, and Burkina Faso played their starters, and Burkina Faso won. So that just illustrates my point about who's gonna really try to win this match. Um, all of that being said, so let's look at the team news. South Africa are going to be without Grant Kakana, who's suspended for the red card he picked up against Terra Mofi in the last match. Tapela Moreno's been ruled out with injury, so has Maseko. Percy Tau and Ronald Williams didn't train yesterday, and Thibaut Mokoena arrived late. So we're looking at 5 to 6 starters, except for Maseko, who probably won't play in this match against DR Congo. Whereas DR Congo, um, the coach, I think, will be playing more of his starting lineup. And at the same time, I think he's going to be giving chances to players like Silas Katompa, who's been really impressive throughout the tournament, but hasn't really gotten a chance to start. Simon Banza, for example, could be another option as a striker instead of sticking with Cedric Bakambu. They have a young goalkeeper who's 25 years old, Dimitri Berto. Many people want to see him in goal. And even Joris Kayembe, who's a really talented left wing back. He hasn't really gotten a chance because Arthur Masuaku has been so good for DR Congo. So those are some of the names I see Congolese journalists and fans wanting to see. But so I do expect both sides to rotate. South Africa have to rotate. I think DR Congo are going to play something closer to their starting lineup, but they might also give a few different players some chances. There was a press conference. Let me give you some quotes from the press conferences, and you tell me who seems more motivated. So, South Africa coach Hugo Bruce. The result will depend a little bit on which team has recovered mentally and from what happened in the semifinals. Hugo Bruce again. The most important thing in a tournament like this is being number one. If you are number three or number four, for me it's exactly the same. I hope that the players who start the game for South Africa will be mentally ready to go at 100% like they did in the 6 previous games. So when he says it doesn't really matter, for me that's like, how seriously are South Africa taking this? Listen to the Congolese coach Sebastien Desabre. We're extremely motivated to play for third place. It's an international match in which we'll be defending our country's colors. And then he says, we'll give everything to bring this medal home and present it to the Congolese people who are passionate about football. The Congolese have been great for us, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you for everything. Again, you take South Africa's injury problems coming into this match and suspensions, whereas DR Congo didn't really have those injury problems or suspensions. You take Hugo Bruce's statements compared to Sebastien Desabre, and then factor in the fact that South Africa have played in all 5 of Cote d'Ivoire's host cities. So they've traveled so many, cities in Cote d'Ivoire, whereas DR Congo have mostly been in, I believe, San Pedro and just Abidjan. So they've traveled a lot less. They've rotated a little bit more than South Africa, who's been pretty strict and stubborn with their starting 11. From an outsider's perspective, all of this are good omens for DR Congo, in my opinion. DR Congo seem like they're the more motivated team. They have a political crisis at home, so they would love, to get that win and that victory. I think it would mean more to them than it would to the South African players. All of that said, what are some positive news for South Africa? Under Hugo Bruce, I think South Africa are the much better tactical team. The way they switched their formation against Nigeria, and they showed that they prepared for the Super Eagles, the way they countered them after they won the ball back, especially in the first half, it was absolutely top-notch. It was such a great job by South Africa. Unfortunately, I do think South Africa make too many individual mistakes when they're defending. Mvala's foul on Osimhen was just one of them. But if you look at the amount of big chances South Africa concedes, and then also the fact that they don't score too many goals at the same time, that's not really a recipe for success. They do everything in between the final thirds very, very well, But defending in their own box, they've been okay, and Ronald Williams has saved them a lot. And then attacking in the final third, I think they've been lacking a little bit. But then actually playing football, combination passing, all of that has been really good. What else? Let's talk about South Africa's possession play versus Nigeria. The way they were, first of all, like I said, counter-attacking very, very well, but then even overloading the pitch. If you look at a heat map, for example, especially in the first half, South Africa were basically overloading the right side of the pitch, forcing Nigeria to break their shape, playing beautiful long passes that were, pinpoint long passes to Percy Tau. I love that first half that they played. And I texted my friends at halftime, is there any more space on the South Africa bandwagon? DR Congo, so if we talk about South Africa and all the nuanced and movement and the overloading and the tactical, strategy, DR Congo, in my opinion, are much more static. They'll play a 4-2-3-1, and it stays a 4-2-3-1, whether they're in possession, out of possession, whether they're in their third of the pitch, whether they're in the final third of the pitch. But I do think DR Congo are one of the most disciplined sides with their shape. So despite the fact that they're just going to stay in their shape the entire time, up and down, as they matriculate up and down the pitch, they're very disciplined. So, for example, their wingers, Yohan Wissa, or whether it's Meshak or Bongonda on the right side, they won't get caught out of position. If the opposing wingbacks or fullbacks are pushing up, you're going to see them sprint all the way back. And they also attack together as a unit. So I think the fact that, they've stayed compact and they have very good tactical discipline. They're not very complicated tactically, but very good discipline. I think that's one of the things that I like about DR Congo. I think for DR Congo, if Gael Kakuta plays, that could be key because there's nobody else on this Congolese team, in my opinion, that has the passing range and ability that Gael Kakuta has. They have a lot of good dribblers like Bongonda or Wisa or Meshak, but nobody can drop back into spaces and play balls over the top or play through passes between the lines, uh, quite like Gael Kakuta does. So if he does that, and if he starts, I think that could really trouble South Africa. So who would this match mean more to? Um, in my opinion, I think it would mean more to DR Congo, and they should be the fresher side, and they should rotate less. And so my pick is going to be for DR Congo. And make of that what you will. I picked against Bafana every single time in this tournament. I feel guilty about it because I love Bafana. Um, but I do think DR Congo just have a little more motivation, a little more freshness. And in my opinion, if they start somebody like a Fiston Mayele or even a Simon Banza, I think they're going to have more goals than Cedric Bakambu. They stick with Cedric Bakambu, who's done okay. But he scored 3 goals in the last, is it 4 or 6 years? I can't remember. I think 3 goals in the last 4 years. Yeah, 4 years, I think, with the Congolese national team. I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, 3 goals in 24 appearances or something like that. So they need to find another goal scoring threat. And I think the fact that they're going to rotate a little bit at striker, that should be a good omen for them. And if we project ourselves past the AFCON, so okay, let's say DR Congo win tomorrow. What next for what next for DR Congo and what next for South Africa? I think South Africa are in a place where they're in the prime of a generation of players. If you look at Ronwen Williams, if you look at Mvala, Kekana, if you look at Mudau, if you look at Modiba, Mukwena, Percy Tau, definitely Zwane, they're all, I think none of those players that I not mentioned are 27 years old or younger. They're all like, maybe the youngest is 27, and I think Zwane is 34 years old, even though he's probably the fittest out of all of them. Same thing with Morena. So my question is, how much longer can you go with this generation of players? Because you've stumbled upon a great generation that know each other very well, that have obviously great chemistry at Sundowns. And I think you can at least get another AFCON out of them, right? Because the next AFCON is in, 16 months? So there's that. And then the other thing is, what about the World Cup? World Cup is in, 2 years? I think you can conserve at least 80% of that lineup for the next 2 years. And so South Africa have a very, very interesting 2 years and change coming up, in my opinion. Are they going to stick with Hugo Bruce, first of all? Because he's being linked to national teams all over the continent, especially Algeria. I don't think he's going to leave to go to Algeria, but first of all, are they going to stick with Hugo Bruce? Second of all, this aging generation of players, can they get to the Americas at least? And they have in their group Nigeria, they have Zimbabwe and Benin. And those are 3 very tough matches that they play. They play those 3 opposition from now until June. So they cannot get into a place where they're satisfied with what they managed to accomplish in Cote d'Ivoire. They're going to have to look forward to those matches between Benin, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. I think they're playing in Nigeria. And that match, in the semifinals is going to give them so much confidence that they can pull off a good result. But that's going to be an absolutely massive 9 points. If they can get 6 out of 9 points there, they'll be in a good position going forward. If they can get 7 or 9, we all have to start paying attention then. What about DR Congo? DR Congo, they're in Senegal's group in World Cup qualifying, and they've already lost a match to Sudan. So they have 3 points out of 2 matches played. That's tough. Senegal are, in my opinion, still the best team on the continent. I don't think Nigeria or Cote d'Ivoire are better than them, despite the fact that Cote d'Ivoire beat them, in the round of in the quarterfinals or round of 16, in the round of 16. So DR Congo, I think they can put up a fight. Maybe they can qualify to the playoff, and try to make it as the 0.5 team from the African continent that's going to play an intercontinental playoff after. I think that's probably their best opportunity. But to do that, same question. Are they going to hold on to Sebastian Desabre, who came in 2022, I think, and has been a great, great manager for them. And why has he been a great manager? It's because he's brought discipline. I talked about tactical discipline, but even behavioral discipline. He's managed to keep a bunch of egos in check. Um, DR Congo is always sort of known as a team that has great individual players but can't come together as a team. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think what they've proven at this AFCON under this coach is that they can come together as a team, and they can even look past, their own needs and talk about what's going on in the country, and that's a lot of responsibility what they did during the national anthem. So if they can hold to Sebastian de Sabre, I think that's the first good sign. But then if we're looking at a 5-year vision for DR Congo, this is one of the biggest countries in Africa. This is one of the richest countries in Africa in terms of primary resources. This should be a superpower on the continent. They even have a huge footballing history. They've won 2 AFCONs. They've been to a World Cup, the first black African nation, as they like to say, that qualified to the World Cup. I don't like that term because there are black players and that played for Morocco. There are black players everywhere. I think even for Egypt in 34, if I'm not mistaken. So what kind of structural improvements can DR Congo make? First of all, they don't have a national technical center. They don't have a headquarters for they have a headquarters for the federation that's a building, but not with pitches and cryotherapy chambers and hot tubs and jacuzzis and medical centers. And that shouldn't be too complicated. FIFA gives money to federations for this. It's just about good governance. And they've 3 years ago, I was looking before I shot this podcast. 3 years ago, the president of FECOFOOT, Constant Omari, was talking about, we're going to have a national technical center that's better than Clairefontaine in France. Clairefontaine is the French Federation's sort of meeting ground. And it's like 3 years later, I just read that the latest headline was from November, that some of the construction workers basically ransacked the entire place, and that it's been slowly progressing at a snail's pace. So they need to get the infrastructure down, and then players can't feel like they're going to war every single time. They should feel like they're going to war on the pitch, but not going to war with organizational issues in the federation. In 2022, Cedric Bakambu, he sent a voice note to somebody and it got leaked. He said, we're the only team out of the top 10 in Africa that doesn't have a training center. We don't have standards, we don't have norms, we don't have seats or toilets in the stadium, and you want us to go to the World Cup with that. Our federation has no political weight, so us losing to Morocco, I mean, he's paraphrasing here, but I'm paraphrasing actually. This is after they lose to Morocco. This was predictable, he says. And I don't want to keep playing in these conditions. I'm in Marseille. He was in Marseille at the time. He says, I'll just live my life. I waste too much time with this team. Damning words. And I thought he probably wouldn't be called back after this, but he was called back, and he's been one of the leaders and the captains of this team under De Sabre. So that's what I mean by managing egos. So yeah, DR Congo have a lot to do, but they have so much potential. They have more potential than South Africa. They have more potential than many of the North African teams, like Tunisia, like Algeria. But they have so much to do. They're so behind. And the political situation in the country and the economic situation in the country is not helping things. But South Africa, the next 2 years, squeeze those lemons as much as you can. We want to see Bafana in the Americas. These next 2 years are going to be absolutely massive. But until then, let's enjoy the third place match. Don't underrate it. We always think like, who cares? It's a third place match. But sit there, watch it. It's football. It's African football. This is the African Cup of Nations. 48 hours, it's all going to be over, and we're going to have to wait another year and change to see another one of these tournaments. So who knows if we'll be alive? Who knows what any of our situations will be? So let's enjoy it and keep an eye out for the final preview tomorrow, as well as a recap for the third place match. Thanks for listening. As always, always love all of your feedback and your comments. I try to read all of them and respond to all of them. So thanks for sending those through. We'll leave it there. Keep it locked in to the African Five Side podcast, and we'll speak soon. Peace.